The title of this video is Abstract Expectations. What is an abstract? In a previous lecture, I mentioned some academic papers and the titles of academic papers. The title is at the top of the page. It's the first thing that you read. What follows the title, though, is a paragraph. And in that paragraph, there are several key questions that are answered. In this course, you'll be learning about those questions and you'll be reading to fill in information about those questions. You'll be able to read faster because you will know what those questions are and you'll be expecting the information there. The three basic questions of any academic engineering paper are this: what is it, how does it fit, and is it good? That's it. They're the three highest level questions. They're very abstract and they're more abstract than you'll actually find in an article. So knowing those questions will get you a certain distance, and you can discuss those questions with executives, but you need to be able to operate at a slightly lower level than that because those three questions, to some extent, they're too generic. So we're going to start to drill into those questions as this course proceeds. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to read academic writing, abstracts, and you'll be able to know what's coming and you'll be able to slot it into a framework and you'll be able to see whether the abstract is a decent abstract or whether it's not. So let's try and set some expectations. Now, in order for abstracts to speak to us in a way that we know what's coming, the only way that we can know what's coming is by our memory. Our memory gives us power. If we know what's coming, we can recognize it quickly, and it also constrains us. Let's just talk through some simple examples. So when we go to a restaurant, most of the time I'll think about what I ordered last time and whether I want to order the same thing again. Many people will do that. If you read a book of a particular genre, you might think about other books in that genre. If you play a particular board game, play a computer game, you'll be reminded of other similar games. Our memory empowers and constrains us. And this impacts us both in our activities and also in our conversations. So let's look at the way it actually works in terms of conversations now. Here's a very light-hearted bit of text talking about a hypothetical scenario where I introduce two people. Hi Jill, let me introduce you to Jack. Jack has just joined our class as a new tutor. Like you, he comes from here. He's doing this, he's going to be able to help us there. Maybe you want to do that in the future together. You're going to be working together. Something along those lines. Now, this doesn't seem like a particularly out of the ordinary introduction. You've introduced people in the past, you get how it works. But there's actually expectations around it. So when you do an introduction, oftentimes if you know one of the parties is very forgetful, you'll say their name a few times. You might explain how they fit together, where they come from, bit of history. Is there any common interests? What are they going to be doing together in the future? You try and make things easy for the people that are involved. There are certain expectations. So let's reflect a little bit about what's actually going on here. Well, we're naming the parties, explaining the relationships, highlighting points of common interest. You name the parties, explain social relationships, highlight points of common interest, and you may launch further social interaction. But there's a purpose to it. What is it doing? Who's speaking? Who is the audience? What are the moves? Well, we've got the moves on the left. They're achieving certain things. What order are they in? If I perform those moves in a different order, it wouldn't work that well. There's a bit of a flow to it. There's a sequence to it. It actually matters the order in which you do things. The same thing is true of an abstract. They have an order to themselves at the highest level, as I said. What is it? How does it fit? Is it good? It needs to follow that kind of an order because an abstract tells you about a piece of engineering work in an academic paper. And the expectations are you're going to get information from it and that information is going to be in a particular form. So let's start to look at the ways in which abstracts actually look at a slightly deeper level. So what is an abstract supposed to do? Well, it needs to carve out a research space. The piece of writing needs to be something new. It needs to be something different. It needs to be something that's never been done before. You cannot copy other people's work. You can't steal their work, and likewise, they can't steal your work. If you've done a piece of work, you deserve recognition for your work, and other people do too. So carving out that gap in the knowledge, where you're contributing, is really important because that contribution might change the world. So the abstract explains the purpose of the research, describes what you're going to do, says what it is, highlights the results and findings. Is it good? And argues for the significance of those results. You don't want to produce work that doesn't contribute anything. Now, there is a little bit of a point here. The question, is it good, is an interesting one because sometimes you can spend a lot of money and produce something that isn't good. By and large, these negative results are rarely published, and I'll talk in some detail about why that happens later. But just to flag now that most of the time, whatever's published has been successful. There's something to think about in that. So abstracts, at the lower level than those 3 questions, has these 5 questions. What is it? Well, what is the problem? What did you do to solve it? And so what? That's all tied up. You want to know the reason for writing this in the first place. Why is it important? Why would a reader be interested in reading this? What is the problem? What does the work attempt to solve? What is the scope? What is the main argument? What is the claim? What else does this work contribute? Are there any implications? What is the power of this work? Did you just solve one specific problem that's never going to be solved again? Or did you find something fundamental that's really going to change life? These are the order of the questions at a higher level. So what does this all give you? Well, within those questions, it tells you what type of paper it is. Is it about measurement, analysis, a prototype? Often engineering papers are about a prototype or a simulation. It gives you context. What other papers is it related to? If you know the field well, as soon as you start reading it, you'll know what other papers in the field relate to this piece of work. So which theoretical basis we use to analyse the problem? Well, you also need to look at it in terms of correctness. Do the assumptions appear to be valid? And what is assumed? It's actually really useful to try and look behind a paper to what is assumed, because you can find new directions by changing the assumptions. I'll talk more about that later. Finally, what are the contributions? What has the work actually added to engineering as a whole? Is it a significant contribution or is it minor? And finally, clarity. Is the paper well written? Can you understand it? Are the sentences long? Are they ugly? Are they klutzy? Is it actually something that's going to give you some useful information because it's well enough written so that you can understand it? So these are the things that an abstract tells you. What does it give you? Well, it gives you a roadmap. It's a summary of what's contained in the paper. It gives you an overview. It gives you a way to decide whether it's worth reading the whole article. You don't want to read the whole thing all the time. You might just want the highest level detail to make that decision. It gives you a preview. It's a spoiler. It's a trailer for a film, if you will. It also provides enough key detail to allow indexing by editors. There are millions of publications out there, and this piece of work has to fit into the pantheon of publications that are out there. So the abstract gives you something that's distinctive, gives you something that can be indexed, gives the reader a roadmap. It really has to do quite a lot of work, and because it's just under the title, it's really important.